You're listening to Greater Good Radio Hawaii. Today's guest is Mrs. Vicky Cayetano, President and Chief Executive Officer of United Laundry Services, Inc., and former First Lady.
What was your first business?
Working with Elvis Presley at 6.5. No, that was really my first job when you think about it. And you know, even at that age, I am so thankful that I had that experience, because I think that experience taught me a lot about discipline. We had to get up really early and practice lines, read the script.
Could you tell us what the role was and what you did?
I played the role of a matchmaker. I mean, it's really a typical Elvis movie. Matchmaker, girl meets boy, you know, Elvis is the boy. But that role was actually supposed to go to my sister Ginny. As you know, I said earlier, she had been discovered by Ed Sullivan. She's very talented. She had done one movie with Elvis called Girls, 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 and she had a very small part in it. And the same director wanted her for this movie that he did, I think it was like a year after Girls, 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 called It Happened at the World's Fair. Well, my father, bless his heart, he'd already committed Ginny to perform for the late President John Kennedy. And so he was like, oh, I cannot take that, cancel that. So he starts looking at me, and I think this idea came on, and he told me that I'd been selected, okay? And of course, I was all excited. And then he sent me with a governess, I mean, somebody I didn't even know that well, because my mom and dad had to accompany Ginny. So here I am, the minute I walked in, even a 6-year-old could tell. I knew from the face, the director's face, it's like, this is not the girl we had selected. So they had me read for the part, and I did, and I was like, oh, how could you do this, Dad? But I just went for it, and then the next thing I knew, we were flying up to Seattle. You know, it was the World's Fair, 1962. But what an experience, and Elvis was the nicest man. I mean, such a gentleman. I remember there was one scene, and I was just homesick, and so I started to stutter, and you know, my lines, and you know how it is when you start stammering, it gets worse with every take. I mean, this must have been like 30 takes. It was bad, and I knew it was going to get worse. And the director was Norman Torok, was a really big guy, and I was so intimidated. And then I just remember my relief when Elvis said, that's a wrap. The little lady and I are going for dinner. And he took me to dinner, and I started crying and telling him how homesick I was, because my family, they weren't with me. It was just this governess. And he listened, and the next day we did the same scene. I just went right through it, you know, no problems. And that stood out in my mind that, you know, when you have that kind of influence, if you can make people feel good about themselves or feel better, make them feel comfortable, what it can do. I mean, here I am, what, 44 years later, and I still remember what he did.
Have you ever felt that there was the glass ceiling or discriminated against as a woman ever, especially in business?
I've never felt that from myself. I will say that I think when a woman is tough, that the community at times tends to be a little bit more judgmental. You know, they use a different word for it. Whereas with men, they'll admire it. Oh, he's really a tough CEO. But somehow for a woman, I think it is a little bit, they're not quite used to that. But having said that, I will say that I don't think as women we should try to be like the men. I think we can govern and administer in our own way with just as much firmness, but with a different approach, you know. And so I think when I say something, my staff knows I mean business, but I really don't have to have 4-letter words mixed in with it or anything like that. It's not necessary. I think women, we tend to be a little bit more nurturing, a little more detail-oriented. You know, I think those are some of the traits that we just naturally have within us.
So I'm wondering, did you ever feel like it was a disadvantage? Because, you know, as a woman, we want to take that lead role in nurturing of your children and making sure that you spend that time with them as they grow up.
I think it's important that spouses are very supportive of each other, and now we have a role reversal. So hubby stays at home and he cooks and he does a wonderful chili and spaghetti. And you know, staying at home is a full-time job, and in many ways even harder, I think. I give moms a lot of credit because that is a 24/7 job, and often thankless, you know, and it is priceless what we do with our children at home. I think as a woman, if you choose to have a career and also want to work, it is a little bit more challenging.
Your parents played a really important role in your life as well, and could you share us maybe some of the lessons they taught and why they're so important to you?
Oh, you know, when I became First Lady, I truly realized what a wonderful mom I've had in terms of how she taught me, because it's not something you learn overnight, but she taught me a lot of the social graces of making people feel welcome, you know, little things that we take for granted. It's moms that instill those details into you. From my dad, I learned about perseverance and hard work. He had a great work ethic, and he really instilled that in us. And that, I would say, really comes from good parenting. Not just that they're born with it, but you need to instill that work ethic in them. And I still remember one day, I was about maybe 13 or so, and my dad decided he'd have a little heart-to-heart talk with me. And he said, well, you know, you're not talented like your older sister, which is true. I cannot play the piano like that. And he said, and you're not cute like Liz, that's my younger sister. I was like, well, where's this going, Dad? Great for my self-esteem. And then he says, but I'm going to tell you something. If you think like a man, act like a woman, and work like a horse, I think you'll do just fine. I said, oh, okay, maybe I'll get the roles mixed up and act like a horse.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more on Greater Good Radio.